Welcome to Car Honey. My name's Griffin, and this is my Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Not only are we going to be reviewing this car and the mods that I've done to it, but alongside it in this Italian series, we are going to be reviewing a Ferrari 812 GTS and a Maserati MC20, because ever since I bought this car, I have wondered, what is it about these fast, loud, playful, kind of unreliable and proverbially over-caffeinated cars that makes people really fall in love with them? And if Alfa Romeo is offering this kind of driving experience, what do you get in a Ferrari or a Maserati that costs more than double what this car does? And how do they relate since the manufacturers have so much history together? Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, and Maserati have shared a long history together. Alfa Romeo was started in 1910, Maserati in 1914, and then Ferrari actually started within Alfa Romeo and then left and established in 1939. As Ferrari became the dominant Italian manufacturer, it had influence on Maserati building their engines, even owned them at one point, and then after that actually built the current flagship models, the Quadrifoglios, for Alfa Romeo. So they have shared more than just a history. They share bloodlines, they share major influence in the way that they're built, in the way that they drive, and we want to figure out what that's all about. How do these feel similar? What makes them so great? And for the Italian cars at least, we want to know, does more money equal more better? Or does more money just mean more electrical problems? And while we're at it, if you actually take your Ferrari out of the garage, is it the true king of these Italian cars? So we're going to compare and test them on the street and on the track like no one ever has in this series. So you should subscribe if you want to see that. This is my personal car. I bought this in 2020. It's a 2018 Alfa Romeo Giulia. It's the cheapest of the three by far and the oldest brand, so why not start with this one? And there's a little bit of like family history to it to me. My mom is a huge fan of Alfa Romeo. She had an original Giulia, a 67 Sprint, and my dad was a huge fan of the brand and the car itself. I remember my dad and I saw Jeremy Clarkson's review of the Giulia when it came out, the Quadrifoglio, and we were both just super stoked on the car, and I kind of set it as my dream. It was part of my bucket list to own one, and the whole experience was just really magical. But after, getting used to the car and how fast it was compared to anything that I had driven before, and, coming into the reality of this was actually a really heavy car, you want to go faster and you want to go faster on a track, it's not perfect. It has some things that need improvement. So I started modding the car. The first thing that had to happen was the 2018 springs and suspension on this car were like stilts. So I had to lower it. And when I lowered it, that created some other problems. It lost some of its steering touch. It became a little bit more bouncy. So I got in touch with a distributor called Alfissimo, and Jason over there helped me basically cater my mod path with the highest quality parts to make this comparable to basically a GTAm. He got a hold of the GTAm suspension ECU tune to tune the dampers like the GTAm, and this settled the shock absorbers to match the springs. Then we upgraded with his stiffer springs. He makes the stiffest springs available for this car, and because of that, we really need that damper tune, and it all worked really nicely. But then on the track, it was lacking turn-in, it was very understeery, so we did the GMS camber kit, which allowed us to tune the camber, but also actually replace one of the large bushings in this front suspension to make the turn-in better. And then of course the car needed more power. I went through multiple tunes with this car and found Squadra through Alfissimo. And Squadra, actually, we're gonna talk more about this during the review, but they make the best tune for this car and really make it more drivable as well as have more horsepower. So at this point, the car has somewhere between 550 and 570 horsepower. It's a lot stiffer, but compliant, not bouncy, really refined for a heavy sedan. And then of course, I modded the exhaust. So I have an X pipe, so a mid-pipe replacement to make it louder and sound a little bit better, which you will hear here. This is the OEM muffler, but I changed the tips to be larger and black so that it looks better. And then here's the thing I really want to focus in on. The spoiler on this car is made by Alfissimo to replicate the Alfa Romeo Giulia Racing Edition spoiler. It is not the GTA spoiler. A lot of people don't understand what this spoiler is. People keep putting the GTA spoiler on it, which is too large in my opinion for the common quadrifoglio. It doesn't look right, and people don't realize that there's something better and in between there, which is the Racing Edition spoiler, which Alfissimo has replicated perfectly. It's larger than the stock one significantly, but it maintains that same shape and curvature, and it matches the car perfectly. It gives it this aggressive look, and the car is really dialed in. The last thing to do is all aesthetic, some track preferences. I have a brake upgrade coming, and we've been taking some weight out of the car to see if we can improve there. So I'm gonna put carbon buckets in the car. I've already ripped out the back seat. We've saved 55 pounds, and we're gonna save another 70 pounds with the seats, and basically build this out to the closest thing we can get to a GTAm without getting a GTAm. So as we go into the driver's guide with this car and walk through each point of the driving experience, we're gonna bring in what is different between this one and the stock as far as the way it feels from these mods, as well as really figure out what are the Italian factors here, what makes this thing feel like a Ferrari and a Maserati, and where's the thread. Does this car feel Italian, Chase?
Yes.
How so?
I'm not sure if we're gonna make it another mile.
All right, so let's start with the driver position on this car, something I'm obviously very accustomed to. I actually have some complaints with this. As a street car, it's really comfortable and just basically exactly how you want it to be. But because of these comfort seats being a little bit like high, I'm on the lowest setting, and I can still see all of my you know, turning points, the edges of the front of the vehicle like you want. But if I go any higher to see more, I'm then having issues with the roof, especially because of this line right here. The roof line kind of cuts in a little bit. I actually ripped out the handle out of this because my helmet can't fit in.
Track setup.
Yeah, and it was really annoying. So
And for weight.
And for weight saving, of course.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more comfortable and flexible street seats. It has these sort of insanely large hip and side bolsters that are really adjustable. Are they air inflated?
Yeah.
Is that the method?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of adds to the performance sort of snugness that you need when you're driving this car hard. But what we did find is when you have it fully inflated on your side, which you need for tracking or driving hard, then your elbows get cut off. So when you're really trying to turn, you can't completely.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why the next upgrade I do is going to be a carbon bucket.
Yeah.
Because they support your hips, not your sides and your thighs.
Right.
When you're on the track and you're sloshing around, or these seats are squishy, so you're feeling extra bounce, extra movement in your body, it's really hard to be focused on the feedback from the car and the tires and the steering wheel and everything, and read the car and also feel comfortable or confident pushing the car, because you're micromanaging your own weight. So this locks you down and really solves that problem almost entirely. Still want the carbon buckets because they're going to be lighter. They
also
will actually
more rigid.
And more rigid. You'll probably feel the chassis a bit more.
Yeah.
And they will save about 35 pounds each too.
So you've made a lot of changes to the steering on this car, and I haven't driven it basically since you had it, I think, stock.
Yeah.
And what I was feeling is, I really actually like the steering wheel a lot. It feels very similar to a Cayman steering wheel, maybe a slightly larger, but like ergonomically, I think it's spot on. I had no complaints at all. You
know what they do is they're kind of mimicking the classic steering wheels.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this rim, and then it's concave in the center.
Yeah.
So you get kind of that very round, thin rim feeling.
Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah.
It's nice. I think you nailed the sensitivity and the turning ratio on the setup. It's definitely quick, and it's a lighter steering, but it's not darty. It's not gonna betray you, and it feels really controllable, which for a heavy, sedan, four-door sedan, I think that's exactly sort of the weight and the responsiveness that you would want in this type of car.
Yeah, it's electronic steering and it's Italian. It's not going to be super feedbacky at this point, so it's a little bit numb. You get some NVH. It's not numb in a bad way, like where you're like, I'm getting nothing through the steering and this sucks. Like you're getting plenty of through the steering, but just not in a like, obviously not like a Porsche or something where you're actually getting movement from the tires. But you can read what the car is doing. It's super sharp, and for people who are like big Alfa Romeo or Giulia fans, if you've ever driven a Giulia or a Quadrifoglio especially, it's got this reputation for being like the sharpest steering in a sedan. One, I think BMW has upped their game probably a bit, but at the same time, when you have a stock car, it's different as you modify it. So we lowered the car. That took out some of the steering sharpness. Then we fixed the camber and some of the suspension components. That put the sharpness back in, but with the increased camber, it's got better turn in. And one thing that I think super fans don't want to hear is that this car, you can feel the weight on the track. It is too heavy for the track most of the time, or at least in stock form, and it really struggles with understeer. The suspension squishes up under load, under high load, and it doesn't help. Like just because it was fast on the Nürburgring, people think like, oh, it's got to be so good. That's because the Nürburgring is a very choppy, high-speed course, and the car is pliable in that way. But under like very controlled, precise, short track conditions, the car does struggle to corner.
Plus you have the semi-slick tires that come on this.
The Pirellis also make you kind of cheat with 60 treadwear tires.
60 treadwear on a four-door sedan.
Exactly. You take those out and then you lose a lot of that precision as well.
That's maybe the most Italian thing I've ever heard. Like, it's a bit overweight. Maybe we throw a semi-slick on.
Like
fix everything.
So as much as I love this car, the throttle is one of the biggest weak points. I guess you could say it's somewhat Italian, like everything is just a little bit lighter and more playful, and it's really touchy. So not only do you go into boost really fast, which makes the car feel probably a little more peppy than it actually would otherwise. And I can say for certain that's the case, and I'll explain why with the modified tune on this car. Because it's so sensitive and you don't need very much play, I'm talking about millimeters making a change in the throttle. When you're in a corner on the track, on the street it doesn't matter, but on the track, you let out a little bit and your car dives. Or you give on a little bit and your car lifts. And you don't want that. It's really sensitive. I hated it, especially on like Sonoma Raceway where it's really technical. It hurt me a lot with time. So the tune that I put on this car is from Squadra. I think they're in Holland. Tuned out a lot of that problem by desensitizing the throttle, which means the car doesn't feel as punchy unless you adjust your foot tolerance or your expectation and then just give it more throttle, and then the car feels the same except for more power because it's tuned for more power. But you have now this adjustability, especially like if you're going to be in a drift or wheel spin oversteer, you actually have adjustment. Before it was fast, like wheels spinning, and then you let off a little bit and then the car snaps back, which is safe and good. That's one of the positive things about this car, but it's really aggressive. You can't hold a drift as well if you're not really focused on it. So now you can adjust the throttle a little bit and adjust the drift a little bit more. Not that I do that very often, but it is really helpful.
I had a big problem with the brake pedal and getting used to how sensitive it is and how on or off it felt, and the initial bite of the brake pedal almost felt like it was electrically assisted, which I think you actually said it
is. So this is the intelligent braking system. It's basically electronically modulated. So you're not really choosing how much brake you want. That much, I mean, you do, of course, but you don't have room to modulate.
You're not feathering the brake pedal in this at all, and you sort of like you creep up on the like bite point. And then the Italian goes, oh, I'll take it from here, and just like puts you into 30% brake force. And you're like, oh, holy shit. So I felt like I was driving, just like a bucking horse back and forth, trying to figure out how to feather this brake pedal. And you eventually learn the car. That's the theme, I think.
That's the theme with the Italians. That's how the Ferrari was too.
Is they have distinct personalities, and you need to work around those. got proper pull.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fast.
Yeah. It's got that,
I like this.
that ideal track power to it, you know?
Yeah.
That sweet spot. Anymore, this won't betray you on track. It won't bite you in the ass if you like over. I mean, yeah, you absolutely can get a lot of oversteer out of a corner exit, but it's manageable.
Yeah, so this engine is awesome. What is it?
Basically, they took the V8 from the Ferrari. Ferrari did actually engineer this car. They took off 2 cylinders. It's still got a similar firing order. Only it has 6 cylinders, so that's why it sounds really unique. 505 horsepower or something from the factory. This is tuned to 570 on 93, but we have shitty gas in California, so it's probably doing about 550.
Yeah.
But with a big, 100 extra foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, it sounds awesome. I just have simply no complaints on the power in this car. I think if you got this over 600 horsepower, it'd feel like maybe a little too much for the chassis.
Yeah,
and the
so
weight of the car.
I did a 600 horsepower too.
Yeah.
It was really aggressive.
Yeah.
I could say for sure it had that because it felt like it hit a lot harder than this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't good. Like it wasn't, it felt a little more laggy, just had really high boost.
Right.
And the throttle mapping was even more sensitive
Yeah.
in factory.
Yeah.
It was a joke.
I can imagine.
And on the track, it was horrible.
This seems like a sweet spot. I really like the power in this. And unless you're coming out of a Ferrari, this feels very substantial.
Yeah.
You know? This car is a very unique sounding car to me.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it's very throaty and angry and like deep. It has a lot of bass, but it has some like nice poppy peaks to that bass note.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of a V8.
It does. That's the X pipe.
Yeah.
So this has a mid-pipe configuration where we took out the resonator, and the X actually makes it sound very throaty, and it's got a little bit of hollowness to it.
Yeah.
Stock, the car sounds awesome. It's just too quiet.
Yeah. I hear almost no engine noise. It feels like I'm hearing full exhaust.
100%. This is well insulated.
Yeah, really well insulated from the engine. Talk to me about this gearbox.
This is the ZF8, so it's basically the automatic gearbox that they're putting in every single performance car these days. The paddles are super nice. They're column mounted. They're nice and wide.
On me.
Yeah, and they're
long enough on the bottom.
Yeah, the transmission's very quick, but it's also intelligent. The nice thing about the ZF8 is that you can actually make this car really easy and comfortable to drive.
I was feeling that on the upshifts, there's a little bit of theater.
Yeah.
But there's not too much where you sort of feel like it's gonna jolt the car out of control.
Yeah.
And it's pretty quick for just an automatic transmission.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually one of the reasons why I like to be in manual. I want to decide when that happens, so there is no loss of control.
Yeah.
It's very quick. Let's see if you can get it upshift. So downshift into fourth, third. Now second. Let's go second. And slow. And now don't go into boost. Just ride out towards the top of the gear and then shift.
Yeah, that sounds nice. So let's get into handling and grip on this. My first impression, but we drove about 100 miles yesterday. My thoughts were, with all the setup that you've done on this car, it handles extremely well for a 3,800 pound four-door car. And I felt very confident in it right from the get-go. And I can't say that about all cars. I had the harness on. I felt snug in this seat, even though it's not a carbon bucket. I felt like confident in the driver position, great visibility. The throttle mapping was really nice, so I did not feel like I was gonna kill myself with a power oversteer or anything.
Yeah, and traction control is always off when we're driving these cars.
So
it's race mode,
which we never do in like Porsches because they're so good. So I'm sort of tentative with that.
Yeah, and we'll kind of mention, just in case we didn't cover it already, like traction control in this is horrible, and if it's on, it's going to cut your power and it's going to feel terrible, so we don't do that. But the E-diff in this, the torque vectoring diff, is really good, and it really makes like kind of wheel slip and drifting oversteer really easy to manage.
Yeah, we were pushing pretty hard. I didn't run into any circumstances that I didn't feel like the car could handle.
It's got a lot of grip.
And it has a lot of grip. It felt really well balanced. I didn't feel like it had any heavy bias towards under or oversteer. Definitely have to get it on the track for final determination there.
Yeah.
I know you had some oversteer moments. I had maybe a little bit of understeer yesterday.
Yeah, it is front engine, so you gotta place the weight properly to avoid understeer. So that's important. This is where some of the modifications we did really actually come into play.
Yeah.
So stock, this car on the track struggles really bad with understeer. It's very squishy. On a technical track like Sonoma, for instance, the weight is shifting all over the place. You have to be really careful and micromanage that constantly.
Yeah.
I hated it, to be honest. I was like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
And then when I'm following you and you're in a Porsche, I can't keep up on twisties at all because the car is basically, just feels like a wild animal. When we adjusted, the camber, stiffer suspension, the GTAm, literally, the GTAm suspension or damper tune software controls the suspension or the springs, the shocks, way better. It's way better matched to a stiffer spring. And then we put these prototype springs at the time, but now they're the Alfissimo GTAm springs, which are actually stiffer than the GTAm. They're the stiffest, it's now second stiffest spring you can get. He's making a track version, which will be even stiffer.
These feel perfect.
These feel perfect though. But all of those things combined, especially the camber, the first thing I noticed is following you in your GT4, I could keep up on the twisties without being afraid for my life. Like the car was really planted. And then on the track, I didn't struggle with understeer. Part of that's the camber kit comes with also the uniball joint that we showed earlier from the GMS kit. It gave it, I think it helped with like that stability with turn-in a little bit. So yeah, it corrected all of the problems with the car, and then all of a sudden I went back to Sonoma Raceway and I loved it, which was huge. So we're not talking about a stock car here, especially in that aspect. We really want to make that clear.
I can already say that I love this car because it's mine, and I've made it even more mine. Even though the braking system is touchy and arrogant, the throttle is overly sensitive, and I'm not entirely sure this car is going to last a lifetime, it has so much more than you could ask for out of a car that you can get for almost $50,000. And now the only question is, are touchy brakes, sensitive throttles, sharp, playful steering, and unwavering personalities and ways of doing things something that all these Italian cars share? I'm certainly excited to find out because I am definitely already in love.